Hello, my name's Antony Cummins and I'm the project leader of Natori Ryu, a samurai school of war from the 1500s. Now today I'm going to make this video and show it to you, but I'm going to do it on two channels. I'm going to do it on my Natori Ryu YouTube channel, but also my Antony Cummins Samurai and Shinobi History channel. Now the reason for this is the video is intended mainly for Natori Ryu students so they can understand where the school fits in and have more information about the school they are part of, but also so that the wider research community can understand what Natori Ryu is and what we're actually doing. So here we go. Let's enjoy, or let's get to grips with the history of Natori Ryu. One of the main questions I get is Natori Ryu a Koryu? Now Koryu means old school, so basically was it a samurai school from before 1868? The definitive answer to this is absolutely yes. We know that the roots of Natori Ryu go back into the 1500s. But here's the problem. Natori Ryu existed from the 1500s all the way to the late 1800s, but was then closed down. So then I came along and I started researching samurai and shinobi literature and history, and I came across Natori Ryu and realised it was a massive goldmine of information on Koryu, outside of what you expect to be in Koryu. So we went on a grandiose search to pull all the documents in together, and I put the team in place, and together we all translated the documents so that we could produce the Book of Samurai series, and in that series are all the secrets to Natori Ryu. Now it's ongoing at the moment, and in the future more volumes will come about until we finished everything, and we'll have the complete school of military warfare there in English for you guys to understand. And this includes at least 3 separate sources of Kuden. So there's the Kuden, there's the military tactics, and all the illustrations that go with it. In the Book of Samurai series, you will see that we have written Isui Sensei says, Commentator 1, Commentator 2, Commentator 3. Now, Isui Sensei says does not actually appear in the text. We have put that there. Now, the reason is because that's the main text. We know when you compare all the texts together, all the documents, there's the core text that's written. And from that comes the different Kuden that was written down. So where it says Isui Sensei says, that means main text. Okay, and then Commentator 1 is the Tokyo version that we have. Commentator 2 is actually the Koga version we have, and Commentator 3 is the Odawara version we have. And they're the 3 different versions that we have of the Kuden from Natori Ryu. So you see we have the Kuden, and we also have put it in the documents, but you need to understand that Commentator 1, Commentator 2, Commentator 3 are all either high-ranking students of Natori Ryu, or maybe other Grandmasters, or masters of their own lineage or their own dojo. We're not quite sure, because it doesn't say who they are, but they are definitely qualified members of the Natori school, which have written down their Kuden for us to follow here in the 21st century. Now on top of that, we have the original family's blessing. We have their blessing to carry on and reopen this, and also we have the support of the monk who looks after the grave of the Grandmasters and the family of Natori Ryu. So let's do a bit more on where they're from. Now another question comes into being, and that is, what is Natori Ryu made up of? Now all Japanese schools are basically made up of either one or two things, and that is old teachings from before the first Grandmaster, or something the Grandmaster has discovered and creates a new school from it. Now in Natori Ryu there are actually 3 places where the information comes from, so we have to be careful here. Now there's the original Natori line, the family of Natori that served Takeda Shingen. Now not only did they serve Takeda Shingen, they fought in the vanguard, which was a position of prestige, and they also were tacticians, and they used to provide medical aid for senior members, and they used to have a special sword wound medicine. So we know that Natori Ryu had a full-blown Sengoku period military school inside one of the greatest military armies that Japan ever saw, and that they were well known and respected within there. In the family documents, it says that Takeda Shingen knew of the original Natori Ryu members by name, and they would talk to him often, and they dealt with, as I say, tactics and the medical side of Takeda Shingen. That means when you're researching Natori Ryu, you should be researching the movements of Takeda Shingen, because they were there throughout it all, okay? And even before Takeda Shingen. So we know this is true. But that's not the only place that Natori Ryu information comes from. What we do know about the relationship between Natori and the Takeda is obviously that it ends in 1582. Now, unfortunately, the Takeda clan crumbled in 1582 and were defeated, and Takeda Katsuyori was the leader at the time, and he was crushed and he committed suicide and he died. Now, the last of the Takeda retainers were either going to be executed or they were given the chance to carry on and join the Tokugawa forces. So actually, the Natori clan signed a treaty with the with the Tokugawa, and that treaty exists to this day. It's actually a transcription, but the original one is basically broken up and faded away, but the transcription of that is there. The Natori clan are there in the records, and they are shown as joining the Tokugawa, and eventually the Natori split into different branches, and one of those branches moves to Wakayama, where they serve the Kishu Tokugawa, and we know that Natori Sanjuro Masazumi actually becomes a personal attendant and a military instructor. So he's a personal attendant to Tokugawa Yorinobu, and he's a military instructor to the samurai of that area. When I first started research for Natori Ryu, I made the mistake of trusting Japanese research, which I did in my early days, and I regret it heavily. So I did do the research for the Grandmaster list of Natori Ryu, and if you have a copy of True Path of the Ninja, but it's the blue version, it actually has the wrong information in for the Grandmaster list. The list itself is not incorrect, the list is fine, but it's actually a list of heads of the family of Natori Ryu. It's not a list of the Grandmasters. At first, the two lists go side by side and they're fine, but at a certain point, Natori Ryu itself leaves the Natori family, even though it stayed in quite close proximity to it, but it is taught by other people. That's because one of the Natori members actually becomes quite high with the Lord, and his increase in salary rockets up, and that means he doesn't have time to carry on teaching the school, so he gives the school to one of his top students who adopts the name Natori, and different people become the head of Natori as we go along, and different people use the word Natori, but by the end of it, the people are not. And in the very last years of Natori Ryu, it's actually under Yabutani, the Yabutani family. And of course, now we've resurrected it, it's under the Cummins family, if you like. So actually, it isn't always connected to the Natori family. Even though the Natori family are in Wakayama and the Grandmasters are there, they actually split at some point. Now, as I've said before, Natori Sanjuro Masazumi is our main Grandmaster. He's not the first, he's not the founder. That was Natori Masatoshi. And it's actually his grandson, Natori Sanjuro Masazumi, who writes everything down. Otherwise, the school would have been long lost by now. It would have been long lost. But we know he writes it down. He's also called Isui Sensei, or just Isui Sensei. Now, we have all the records for this, and we know the way he was called. In the Shoninki document, he's actually called Isui Masatake, meaning like Masa the warrior, who is like Isui Sensei. So basically, it's a name that combines his pen name and his real name, but changes it to mean a warrior, because his name is Masazumi, but it's changed to Masatake, which means like sort of the Masa the warrior, if you like. But he is the main person who wrote down all the documents, and he is the main focus of our research, and we call him Isui Sensei. We don't know exactly when Isui Sensei was alive, but he must have been born somewhere between 1620 and 1640. Somewhere between those two dates, because by the time he dies in 1708, if he's born any earlier, he's going to be a little bit too old to be outside of inside the average age range of the Japanese then. So possibly born in 1620, maybe born but he's born no later than 1640, and by 1654 he's actually in service to the Lord. Now we do know that he becomes Gosho Imban, which is basically an attendant, a personal bodyguard to the Lord, and associate, if you like. Now we think from our research there are actually 49 people who hold this position, which sounds a lot, but actually in a domain of thousands of warriors, possibly up to about 10,000 warriors, somewhere, or maybe below that number, but in the thousands of warriors, out of all of them, 49 are picked to escort the Lord and to make sure the Lord's okay, and to be very close advisor, helpers, associates, basically courtiers as well. So they were there looking after him. They weren't high-level people. They weren't the people on the highest income. In fact, they're on quite low income, but they were there as sort of personal friends is a difficult one, but he did become friendly with them. But bodyguard is too misleading. They basically, in turn, looked after him, guarded him by night, guarded him when he went on journeys, guarded him in the baths, had chats with him, discussed military concepts with him, told him what was going on in the area, and basically lived with him throughout his life. And even when he retired and gave way to the next head of the clan, some of those people moved with him to continue protecting him. And we know of those 49 samurai walking around in the thousands of other samurai that Natori Sanjuro Masazumi was one of them, and Natori Ryu was there. But we also know his older brother was there before him, so it might be a family tradition that goes back at least a couple of generations, or a generation serving the Kishu Tokugawa family. So we know that the Natori family were really quite well respected within the area, and we did hear from the last of the descendants of Natori Ryu, or sorry, not Natori Ryu, sort of the Natori family, that the name Natori was very prestigious. And in fact, now the Natori descendants are all of a different name, because after World War II, the last male Natori Ryu killed himself after World War II, and therefore the women who were born as Natori were obviously married off, their names were married off with them, and they were married into the Ishigaki family. And that the second son of the Ishigaki family was actually asked by his Natori grandmother to take the Natori name. She said, in Wakayama, the Natori name is popular, it's famous, it's strong, it's a great name, it's got a grand history of samurai. But he said no, he didn't really like it, he was only young. And to me personally, in a personal conversation, he said he wished he would have done that, and he would have taken on board the name Natori, so that all his life he was known as Natori, to keep that line going. But unfortunately now all male members have gone into different names, and the last of Natori are technically gone, but they're still here, but their names have now changed in the last 2 generations, which is unfortunate. By the mid-1600s, the third Grandmaster of the school, Natori Sanjuro Masazumi, had been born, and he was growing up and starting to do his research. Now he studied from a line which came from Kusunoki Fuden and Yui Shosetsu. Now we don't know exactly who he studied under, but we know that he is probably 2 or 3 removed from Kusunoki Fuden, or 1 removed from Yui Shosetsu. But he was definitely alive when Yui Shosetsu was alive. They were in the same place together, and Isui Sensei studied from, that's Natori Sanjuro Masazumi called Isui Sensei, he studied from that lineage. So that's where the Kusunoki aspect comes in, because Tokugawa Yorinobu named him and said, your school is like the new Kusunoki Ryu, because it had that little bit of Kusunoki involved, but of course it was because of its overall its overall curriculum was massive. However, that's only one of 2 places. There is a third place as well. Natori Sanjuro Masazumi was actually collecting everything from his line. He was collecting everything from the Kusunoki line, but he was also researching all the schools around him at the same time. So we know that the Natori Ryu we have today actually comes from the original Takeda line of Natori Ryu, the Kusunoki line of Yui Shosetsu, but also the research of Natori Sanjuro Masazumi, who went round in the mid-1600s collecting all the information off the old veteran soldiers from the Sengoku period and writing it down. And he put it all together, so it doesn't clearly say which is from where. He just put it all together, mixed it all together, and then broke it back up into many, many sections. One that focuses on water, another one that focuses on the path of the Lord, another one that focuses on shinobi, and he just brought all that information together and reorganized it so that it was easier for people to understand. And I am doing the same thing, bringing it all together because it's been lost again, reorganizing it into our books and bringing it for you guys in English. This means what we have to see Natori Ryu as a form of Y shape, this idea of a Y coming down. On the one hand, we've got the original Natori. On the other hand, we've got the Kusunoki. They meet at the junction point and then continue down through the lineage, through the Grandmasters, and it was re-brought out or reconstructed by us. Now, when I say reconstructed, I don't mean we guessed at anything. All the scrolls are there, all the Kuden is there. We've got everything we can find, and it brings an amazing picture of life in samurai times. Now, Natori Ryu claims to come from ancient times. Now, the problem is, though, with all samurai schools, they claim to come from somewhere they're most likely not. Most of the time, this involves a god or a revelation, and a god visits them, and they get given the secrets of warfare, and then they make their school. Or another essence is they pick someone famous from the past and say, we are going back to that. Now, Natori is this. Natori claims that their information comes from ancient China in a direct descendant, master to master, all the way from ancient China. This is probably not true. This is just stereotypical of what Japanese people did in the 1500s, is they would find some mythological or some legendary ancestor to their school. So what we do know is that Natori Ryu was born out of the warfare of the Sengoku period and probably contains teachings that go from long before that have been passed on, but we know it's repackaged as Natori Ryu or Shin Kusunoki Ryu. So you just got to understand that. However, inside of that, we do know that there are three very historical people who helped the Natori build their information. It's where the original Natori people from before Isui Sensei actually got their information. Now, I'm going to put the people on screen here, but basically you get, so from one person, they got their horsemanship and their archery. From the next person, they got battle formations and castle construction. And from the final person, they got their medicine. And those are the famous people that Natori have in their, not their lineage per se, but in their story. And they are the people that they got their information from. So we know that there's a mythological section and there's also a historical section. And these people at the right place at the right time giving out this information, and the Natori were there with them. And that information was carried forward into the scrolls we have today. Now, Natori Sanjuro Masazumi had a very special relationship with Tokugawa Yorinobu, and it appears from our understanding of the historical record that when Tokugawa Yorinobu retired, Isui Sensei moved with him, and when he died, Tokugawa Yorinobu, his remains were put in place on Koya-san, Mount Koya, and we know that Isui Sensei around a little bit after that retires to a village called Ono at the foot of the mountain, very near the route that goes up the mountain, which I have actually walked and done to visit the grave, and we assume he's moved there to carry on his relationship with his master. So we know that he becomes a page to him when he's either 15 or 25, between those two dates basically. About 15, 25, 30, we're not quite sure when, but we know he becomes an attendant to him, and then he serves him all the way to his retirement. When Tokugawa Yorinobu retires, we know Isui Sensei moves with him, and when he dies, we know that within a short time, Isui Sensei moves to a village at the foot of the mountain where his master is buried at the top, and we then assume from that he's walking up and down to pay homage to his master. And it was quite a privilege for me to walk that same route in the steps of Isui Sensei and stand outside the very grave which Isui Sensei would have stood outside, which is amazing. And we did that with other Natori Ryu students, and we do have visits to Japan, and we do climb that mountain, and we do go visit the grave of Tokugawa Yorinobu in honor of the sort of ancestry of our school. So, you know, it is quite nice to be connected to the past like that, even though there's been a break in the school. Now, we do know that the name of Tokugawa Yorinobu, or not his name itself, but a different name for him, like a Buddhist name for him, actually was put in place in the dojo. So when you see a dojo and you see the actual altar with something on it and the scroll, actually the name for Tokugawa Yorinobu was actually placed there in Natori Ryu, and prayers were given to the master this head of the House of Kishu, because the Natori served the House of Kishu. And we do know that on special occasions during the study, Natori Ryu students would actually get in ceremonial robes, would cleanse themselves first, get incense going, ceremonial robes, pray to the ancestors, pray to Tokugawa Yorinobu or his spirit, and then actually go through some of the teachings. Now we do know that eventually the secret recipe for Natori Ryu's medicine was actually taken from them, sort of forced politically from them, and it was then distributed among other people. But we do know from the records of the Boshin War that actually there are Natori Ryu medical sections, units within the army, and that you can see that the Natori Ryu medicine is actually travelling with the shogunate army, or at least with that detachment of it from Wakayama. What we don't know is whether they were actually Natori Ryu students, or whether by this point it was that far removed from Natori Ryu that it was other people. But also we do know that, we can assume that at the same time in the Boshin War that some of the advisors would have been Natori Ryu members, because without doubt at that point Natori Ryu were advising the clan on military matters. Now you'll see in Natori Ryu we use the Hidari Mitsudome, which is a crest. It's the 3 teardrop crest which goes in a certain way. Or we will use the Takeda diamond. The reason for this is in old Japan you didn't just have one crest, you had a crest and also a backup crest and sometimes a third crest. There are different usages for the crest and different situations you use them in. Now we do know that Natori Sanjuro Masazumi started his own branch of the family. Now this is very important in historical context. At that time, the head of the family could be literally life or death over everyone. So you could have whoever's the head, the main leader, which is not always the oldest of the entire, because you have cadet branches. So you could have some younger person who's the head, actually could execute anyone within the family and pretty much have no consequences for it. Obviously that wouldn't have happened often, but it is a reality, and we do know from with reports of Western accounts that actually used to happen. So many times you get a branch detach and start themselves, so some man could be the head of the branch and the top. And we do know Isui Sensei did this. He became the head of his own branch. So before him, we think that there was really the use of the Takeda diamond because of their connection, either related to or their generational loyalty to the Takeda clan. They were using that Takeda diamond. Now the fact that they are allowed to use the Takeda diamond probably hints to a possible blood connection, but again that needs more study. But our branch of the Natori used the Hidari Mitsudome. Now there's one problem here that all students should understand, is that in the history of Japanese crests, which I researched with my associates, the Hidari Mitsudome is actually recorded as 2 different ways. Now there is no real way to know which way it was, because some people see, the problem with this is it's a teardrop in a circle. So some people, Hidari means left and Mitsudome means like the 3 teardrops, if you like, that actual shape. So what we have a problem is it the edge of the teardrop, the thin edge, or is it the bulky edge that's the lead one? Is it spiraling that way, or are we talking about the one that flips out that way? So we don't really know. Now even in top line Japanese research, they will say different places at different times would swap this around, and some people would say the tail was the lead bit and some people would say the bulbous part was the lead bit. We don't know, and we don't have a picture from Natori Ryu at the moment that can qualify this. Or if we do have a picture such as that, it's actually confused with other elements. Now the reason for this is, or the reason we've picked this specific one, is because the temple is run by the Yamamoto family, and the Yamamoto family also have Hidari Mitsudome, and theirs is exactly the same as Natori Ryu. So we've gone on a hunch and used this one, but it doesn't mean that in the future maybe we might have to change that sign the other way around if we find more information, or we find a picture that tells us it was actually reversed in Kishu, in the Wakayama position. So the research is still out on that one, but as far as we know, that is the official standard for the Mitsudome. That's it. When you look at all the modern encyclopedias, the Hidari Mitsudome is this one. So we've gone with that until we find more information. Natori Ryu is of course famously connected to the arts of the ninja, Shinobi no Mono, and the reason for this is because of the very famous Shinobi scroll called the Shoninki. Now for those people out there, the Shoninki is only one way of saying it. Nobody knows how it's actually said. It could be Seininki. Shoninki or Seininki, we're not sure, but it's famously been called the Shoninki for about 100 years, so we've gone with the popular idea. It's the same as the Bansenshukai of Iga is named, possibly the Mansenshukai. We're just not sure. So Seininki or Shoninki, we'll go with Sho. So basically, this manual became popular in about 1910. And from then, it stormed through the world of history and pretty much created the image of the ninja from an academic point of view, even though that has been heavily laced with popular ninja culture. Now, the Bansenshukai, the Shinobi Hiden, and the Shoninki are three of the most famous ninja scrolls. In fact, they're called the three great ninja scrolls. But without a shadow of a doubt, the Shoninki should not be read alone. It should be read with the Book of Samurai series. We've not at the moment finished the Book of Samurai series, but absolutely, edition by edition, we can see that more information is coming out. And also, it's not the only Shinobi scroll that Isui Sensei writes. There is also another one, or possibly two, possibly more, depending on how you view a scroll. It's not so easy. Sometimes a scroll can be embedded within a different scroll, or sometimes it's a separate scroll, but there's also a chase going on for another scroll that might be connected, or it might not. We're not quite sure yet of the outcome of that. But either way, the Natori family are heavily connected to Shinobi no Jutsu. Now, a mistake that is often made by the public is that it is Takeda Shinobi. It is nothing to do, or has nothing to do, with the Takeda Shinobi. It is everything to do with the Kusunoki branch and the Yui Shosetsu line. So Natori Ryu Shinobi no Jutsu comes through Yui Shosetsu through back to Kusunoki Fuden. Now, it might have other elements in it. We do have an extremely tantalizing sentence in the Natori documents that says, actually, Isui Sensei collected much more ninjutsu, or Shinobi no Jutsu, but because it was all murky and a little bit strange and a little bit magical, he dispensed with it. So, unfortunately, we've possibly lost a massive collection of Shinobi spells, Shinobi magic, because Isui Sensei was more like, no, that's not quite right. And only a few elements of that survive. Now, we do know that some of his psychology within the Shinobi no Jutsu comes from older scrolls and comes from the scrolls that predate him. But overall, it is definitely from the Kusunoki line with a little bit of extra research done. And of course, if you want to understand the Shoninki, which is True Path of the Ninja, have a read of the Book of Samurai series. Does Natori Ryu contain martial arts? Now, let me be clear. By martial arts, I mean hand-to-hand combat. The word martial arts was actually invented roughly around the early 1900s to translate Japanese bujutsu, meaning martial arts. And it always means sort of fisticuffs or swords or spears and that type of thing. Now, of course, in the English language today, martial arts can be military things, but here I'm specifically talking about hand-to-hand combat with various weapons. Now, on the whole, Natori Ryu is absolutely a warfare school. It talks about trenches, defense walls, movement tactics, ship formations, astrology, astronomy even, all of those things like esoteric as long as with scientific, all bound up into something called gungaku, military study, or gunpo, the way of the military. But there are definitely within our text situational examples of martial arts. Now, we have to be careful here. Isui Sensei does say, if you want to learn how to cut someone, go speak to a cutting expert. If you want to learn how to use a spear, go speak to a spear expert. But he clearly has examples where the use of a weapon is within our school. So for example, somebody's gripped this hand, you pull out your sword with your left hand and have stabbed it behind you. Or you've pulled out, somebody's gripped the handle, you pull out a different one. Or for example, when your swords are not available, the art of throwing stones. There's lots and lots of physical things that come from our scroll that could be classed as martial art. But no, at the moment there is no curriculum of hand-to-hand combat with weapons inside the scrolls we have. However, there is a tantalizing piece of evidence, or two pieces of evidence, that have sent me on a quest to try and find a manual called Tanki Yoho. Now the first of these is within our documentation, within the school's documentation, it says in our school there are secret ways of fighting. You have to be careful here. In English that sounds amazing, there are secret ways of hand-to-hand combat, but actually it could mean secret ways of military combat, you know, like with troops. We just don't know. But actually, most likely it's probably hand-to-hand combat that is embedded within the school but has not been written down. Another one is the simple fact that the second example is that we know from the documentation, it says there are 10 scrolls in our school which use the word yoho in it. Okay, the yoho. Now actually there are only 8, so that's a bit strange, but one of them actually is called yoko. So there's a yoko scroll which has the same yo, meaning the fundamental pivot point, and the rest are yoho. But actually, I did more research, and there was a researcher in Japan who's long dead now. When I say long dead, by 20 years dead. And he was actually called Takeda, believe it or not, but not connected to the Takeda family. And he'd been researching Natori Ryu. And in his collection, which is now private and I can't get to it, there's a certificate that says Natori Ryu this, Natori Ryu that, but also right next to that it says Tanki Yoho. Tanki is a word which means, originally is like a horse combat, if you like, a horse movement, but actually later comes to mean individual combat. So Tanki Yoho could mean the pivotal ways of individual combat. Now we know that it says in Natori Ryu there are secret ways of fighting in our school, and that most likely there's a certificate for fighting ways within the school. But what we don't have is a copy of that scroll. So unfortunately, at the moment, we have to say, no, Natori Ryu does not have outright martial arts. But possibly it did in the past, and it might do in the future, because I'm on the search for this manual of Tanki Yoho, and I intend to find it. So, and hopefully it'll be fully illustrated, and we can bring back the martial arts of Natori Ryu. But let's wait for a while for that one. So can you join Natori Ryu today? Absolutely, you can join Natori Ryu. Now, what I've done is I've set up a worldwide organisation who we keep in touch with each other, obviously through the internet, and some people are close together, some people are far away. We at present have a few hundred members, and quite a lot of those members are fully dedicated to the school. Now we do have a rank system within the school, but I don't believe in grades, I don't believe in black belts or giving certificates of that type of rank. So what we've done is we've structured the school on the original format that the school was in. So for example, we get like basically Gunpo Sha, which means military person. We get Gunbai Sha, a person of esoteric ways. We have the Jodai, who's actually the castle steward. So people are given either one of two things or both. They're given a rank within the school, which starts basically at sort of novice. You then join the school as an officially and get a number. You then show that you're dedicated to school by getting your 3 uniforms. You don't buy them from us. We're not trying to get money out of you. You just got to get the uniforms. You've got to get your swords to show that you're serious about samurai training, and you then use the number on the different parts of your equipment. If you then pass the foundation course, you go on and you can become an assistant instructor, and then you can go on to becoming a licensed instructor, and then you can become a senior instructor, and then we can do master of the school. None of us have mastered the school as of yet. We've not even published all the scrolls yet, but we have got a lot of information out there, and we do have people going through all of the different courses. Now, the courses are run by the Jodai. He does them across the internet. So, to progress in the school, you have to put in small articles, you have to show videos of your understanding, you have to build castles, you have to show the formation understanding, you have to show how to sort of point to north, how to navigate by the stars, how to build fires, keep body warmers. There are endless things you have to do, and this is normally done by you submitting articles to the Jodai for a small fee. We try to keep it as cheap as possible, and that you'll have to build things, and we tell you upfront what you need, how much it's going to cost, and you will pick your course. So for example, like a university degree, you start at the basics with the foundation course, which is only 12 weeks long, and that's your introduction. And then you look at all the courses and say, okay, I'm going to study the stars, I'm going to study esoteric aspects such as Kuji, I'm going to study military formations from military tactics from Sun Tzu, and you will pick everything. Or you might go down the Shinobi route and become a Shinobi instructor. It's your choice how you interact with Natori Ryu, so it's all up to you. But the first thing you have to do is join Facebook Natori Ryu Hub and ask for a man called Andrew Thoburn. You can call him Andrew, or it's probably best to just call him the Jodai, because that's his title, that's the job he does in the school, and he runs all the courses and makes sure everyone's doing the right thing at the right time, and they're all following the teachings that I've laid down. Now, of course, I lead the school, but I keep to the research side. I keep away from that section, and the Jodai runs everything, and he's in my Hatamoto command group, which also includes Jay Kane, who runs the esoteric side of things and looks at the esoteric dates when we should worship the gods of war, celebration days, how to celebrate the dead, and those types of things is what he likes. So I would like you to consider joining Natori Ryu. Now, one question you might ask is, can I join it because I belong to another school? Now, there's a real strange thing in the samurai community at the moment, which is not historically correct, where they think you can't join more than one school. You can. People did join more than one school back in the day, but they didn't join more than one school of the same type. So, for example, samurai in the olden days didn't join two sword schools. They didn't join two spear schools. They would join multiple schools, but a spear school here, a sword school there, a military tactics school here, a swimming school there. They would literally fill their education with different schools, and within that school they would find the things they needed to find. So your path is up to you. Yes, if you do another sword school, the only people or the only person stopping you from joining Natori Ryu is your other school, because we won't mind if you join two schools, because we follow historical traditions, and that's exactly what they did in the past. So yes, you're invited to join us. Yes, it's okay if you have another school. Yes, it's okay if you're poor. We don't mind. We try to charge the base minimum. To join Natori Ryu, there's a single fee of £12. The reason this is £12 is because £5 comes to the school to me, £5 goes to the monk as a donation to the monastery and the temple to keep it going. £1 goes to Miyako Koyazumi, because she will write out your name in katakana, which you can use later on. So it's for a Japanese person writes it out, and £1 goes to the Jodai for an administration fee for him filling all the forms in. So it's really not much, and that's it for life when it comes to fees. That's it. There's one off. I get a small amount of it, or half of it, or just under, and the rest of it goes to donations and different people. And basically from that, you will forever be a member. You get the drop, which is a newsletter, and you can be associated with our school as much as you like. But then, of course, you join and actually start the courses. Now, the courses, as I said before, easy. You can pick whichever ones you want to do, and what we do ask is a minimal fee of £1 per article. Now, it's quite cheap. Eventually it will add up to quite a bit of money, but it's done on such a low easy to access level, that it's okay, because what it actually does is pays for the Jodai's time. 50% goes to the school, so basically 50 pence goes to the school and 50 pence goes to the Jodai, and the Jodai does far more work than your 50 pence will get. And of course 50 pence comes to keep me going and the research going and printing out and things like that, and keeping me going to Japan and finding hopefully the Tanki Yoho. So if you do decide that this video has made you interested in Natori Ryu, then please do join Facebook, Natori Ryu Hub, or the email is on the screen now for Andrew Throwburn, called the Jodai. You can contact him and he will tell you everything you need to know to get training with us. We do trips to Japan when we get enough people to go, and of course when the pandemic has gone, and we do visit the different sacred places in Japan for Natori Ryu, and we do run a very close knit community within our school where people help each other out and they visit each other all around the world, and we all get together and have some lovely times and some training sessions and lots of port and cheese at my house, where you can the headquarters, which is called Kyugakukan. So you can go up the ranks, you can absolutely get to the level of instructor, you can start your own school, you can use Natori Ryu in your own school, but we just ask that you do it our way, so to make sure it doesn't go all crazy out there with people with different theories. We have a central theme here to make sure that there's the correct teachings going out. Okay, my name is Antony Cummins. I'm the project leader of Natori Ryu. I hope you've enjoyed the video as long as it has been, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you as new students, I hope, coming through the gates of the dojo in the future, we hope. Let's see you there, and please, if you don't want to join it, then at least pass this video around and show people that there's some serious research here on samurai military ways.